Hello, I'm Jean Imes. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at the College of Central Florida. Starting college is a really exciting time in the lives of our students. But for some students and their parents, applying for financial aid can be a little bit intimidating. But we have good news for you today. At colleges and universities across the United States, there are financial aid professionals who are available to guide you through the process, answer your questions, and get you off to a great start. Let's take a look at how financial aid works. From the financial aid office perspective, financial aid is any funds that a student receives that helps them pay for their college expenses. In the financial aid office, we begin the process of creating a financial aid offer for a student by calculating the cost of attendance. That includes tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, and miscellaneous personal expenses. Because we understand in the financial aid world that going to college costs more than just tuition and textbooks. We want to make sure that the student has all the funding they need to be successful. When you submit a financial aid application, the student receives back a number that's called the Expected Family Contribution, or the EFC. And that is essentially a measurement of the student and the family's ability to pay those college expenses. If the student has been employed, there's a student contribution, and there's also a parent contribution for dependent students. We take that cost of attendance, we subtract out the family contribution, the EFC, and that gives us a number called financial need. And that's important as we build a student's financial aid offer. We group financial aid into two different buckets. Need-based aid, which has nothing to do with classroom or test performance, but everything to do with the family financial circumstances. The other bucket is non-need-based aid, which is not based on financial circumstances at all, but might be tied to classroom performance or special talents or performing skills. And so it's important for us to know that financial need in order to retrieve aid from the right source for a student. There are 4 different types of financial aid. On the right-hand side of this pie chart, you see scholarships and grants. I always tell students that's the best kind of financial aid because it's money that does not have to be repaid. It's scholarships typically from private donors, maybe from federal or state sources. Grants are typically federal or state, but it's money that's given to you that does not have to be repaid. On the left-hand side of the pie chart, we have federal student loans. Sometimes there are state loans, depending on which state you live in. Those are to help students balance their budget. Financial aid offices everywhere are committed to helping students graduate from college with as little debt as possible, or maybe even no debt. The final piece of the pie chart here is federal work-study employment. And that's a job on campus, and that is a need-based aid that's available for some students. I'm a big fan of the Federal Work-Study Employment Program because I think it really connects students to the college in a more meaningful way. They get to know faculty and staff, and they really have a connection to the college that helps them be successful. The work-study employment is a paycheck that students receive, and it can stack on top of loans and scholarships and grants. On this slide, you see the sources of financial aid. The federal government is the single largest provider of student financial aid, typically in the form of Pell Grants and federal student loans. There are some other grants and funding sources available through the federal government, but those are the largest two. States also provide financial aid. In the state of Florida, you might be familiar with the Bright Futures program, which is a state scholarship program. Colleges and universities all have their own sources of scholarships and funding for students. At the College of Central Florida, we provide over $1 million a year of endowed scholarships for our students. So every single college and university has that source. And I tell students, don't just apply when you're a freshman, but every year that you're in college, apply for those scholarships. Private sources are plentiful, especially for students who are graduating from high school. Stay in touch with your guidance counselor for information on those private sources of scholarships. And then employers play an important role. Students may work for an employer who provides scholarships for their employees. or their parents may work for an employer who has scholarships for children of their employees. Everything in financial aid begins with the free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as the FAFSA. This FAFSA opens up on October 1st of every year for the following year's academic programs. So for instance, for the 22-23 academic year, the FAFSA opens on October 1st of 2021. This FAFSA for 22-23 will be using financial information from tax year 2020. Students, you're going to want to make sure that you carefully follow the financial aid page of your college or university because they will have deadlines for when this FAFSA needs to be submitted. This slide shows the FAFSA on the web. So if you log in from your computer, go to the website listed on the bottom of the screen, this is what you will see and where the FAFSA starts. It's really not as scary as it might seem. The other option for submitting the FAFSA is to use the myStudentAid application on your smartphone. It has all the same functionality as the FAFSA on the web, so if that's how you would like to submit it, that will be just fine with us. Students and parents, I encourage you, if the FAFSA gives you the option of using the IRS data retrieval tool, to please use it. It's really quick, very easy, a couple of clicks, and you will be taken over to the IRS database where you can import your 2020 income tax information directly into the FAFSA. It's quick, it's easy, and it reduces the chance of errors on your FAFSA. Also, students and parents, if you're submitting a FAFSA for the first time you submit the FAFSA, you need to create what's known as an FSA ID, or a Federal Student Aid ID. Essentially, it's a username and password. You're creating an account there, and you will use that username and password to authorize the submission of the FAFSA. Essentially, it will become your electronic signature. You set this up the first time, the student needs an FSA ID, and whichever parent is putting information into the FAFSA with the student, that parent will need an FSA ID also. Students who are transitioning from high school to college are most often considered dependent students for the purposes of federal financial aid. There's a series of questions on the FAFSA that asks students some things such as, are you married? Are you a veteran of the United States military? Those sorts of questions. For many students, the answer is no to all of those, and they are considered dependent students. Therefore, the parent information is required. When all the student and parent information has been entered, then the FAFSA requires a signature, again, for the student and for the parent, and you'll use that FSA ID to sign the FAFSA. Once you submit this at FAFSA, you're going to receive a student aid report, which is a synopsis of the information that was provided. Take a moment and look at that student aid report, or SAR as we call it in our office, and make sure that everything looks good. It's going to be your confirmation that it's been submitted and that your financial aid application is moving forward. For some families, there are special circumstances that need to be taken into account in providing a financial aid offer. Some of the circumstances that might arise are if someone has lost employment, or employment has been significantly reduced. Maybe there's been a death in the family, or extensive medical expenses that were not covered by insurance. Those are some of the circumstances that we see sometimes. If you think your family might have some special circumstances, go ahead and complete the 22-23 FAFSA using the correct information from 2020. Then contact the financial aid office at your college or university, explain to them your special circumstances, and they have a process called professional judgment that can allow you to submit new documentation and have your file reviewed to make sure that your financial aid offer most closely reflects your current ability to pay for your college expenses. Very important that you know that that process exists. We're always available for questions, and here's the contact information for me. The easiest way to reach us is at askfinancialaid@cf.edu. Now that we've looked at how financial aid works, students, we want to wish you all the best in your college career. Most importantly, we want you to know that your financial aid team is always here to help.